Hi, I'm Lisa Gonzales, Chief Business Officer here in Mount Diablo Unified. Happy March. This week's episode of Ask the CBO, we're going to look into Title I funds. There have been some questions, and so I wanted to make sure that I answered those for you. So let's talk about what it means to be a Title I school. Title I funds are federal funds. They're intended to support low-income students. Title I schools and Title I districts exist across the nation. And more funds go to higher poverty schools simply because they will typically have more students that are low income. This is generally determined by free and reduced price meals. Clearly, that's changed a little bit with the meal requirements over the last few years. But in essence, this is how you derive Title I. What I'm going to do on these slides is I'm going to allow you to see some of the information that I've put on these. You can stop, you can start the video again, and it'll give you an opportunity to look at what is allowable and what is not allowable. There are many different categories of what is allowable and what is not. So I'll go through all of these with you real quickly. But in essence, Title I funds are very, very carefully monitored. There are certain things you can and can't do with them. So let's take a look at some of the things you can do. The column on the left, again, is what you can do. Allowable expenses, the columns on the right, you cannot. So you see things like cash awards, gift cards, incentives. You can't do anything like that, but you can do awards for attendance, award certificates. You can purchase books, instructional supplies, parent involvement. Again, stop these whenever you need to. Again, on the left side, a lot of Title I funds are allowable for students who are homeless. Items of clothing, immunizations, food, some of the medical services that school districts may provide, counseling, low or reduced fees for AP testing or IB testing. Again, allowable on the left, non-allowable on the right. There's some things that you can do with teacher salaries, as you can see in the top box. So reducing class sizes in certain schools, again, Title I. Substitutes when the teachers are absent, especially if they're going through some type of a training, data coaches, counselors, some of our paraprofessionals or our classroom aides. Again, if you take a look there on the left side, allowable versus non-allowable, conferences, expenses related to conferences, consultants for professional development. Again, the substitutes you see there. Technology. Certain parts of technology are allowable, and I'm going to get to supplanting in just a second because this is where the difference comes in. Activities to support instruction, summer school, after school programs, some of the assessments that we use to figure out exactly where students might be performing well or not performing well. All of those are allowable. Here is the really important piece of Title I. A district cannot supplant. So here you see some kids that are participating in field trips. A school district cannot say, Title I schools, you can pay for your field trips out of Title I, and other schools have to go into regular local control funding formula funds for the same exact field trip. So for example, we can't say in a district our size, Title I schools, if they need more Chromebooks, they're going to use Title I funds as opposed to the other schools where we're going to provide that for them out of our district budget. That's what it means by supplanting. You can't decide that certain programs are going to be paid for out of general fund for some schools, and then other schools have to pay for it out of Title I. It needs to be above and beyond what other schools that are non-Title I would be receiving. Now, there are always some questions around processes. And I have to tell you that monitoring Title I funds and following the rules is one of the most challenging things that we do, because there are very, very clear restrictions. And so internally, we have some really great processes on what we do. We have monthly Title I trainings for principals. So any principals in Title I schools who receive Title I funds, they have specific trainings. Their SIPSAs, their school performance plans, they are required to have items identified, and then the Title I funds can be used to pay for things that are in those plans. There's a clear approval process. So you have many individuals who have to approve Title I spending before those funds are able to be expended. We do that in the fiscal department. We also assist instructional services. And then any purchase requisitions that are going through, every single one is checked before we receive a number that a school site can then use to spend against. There are also checks and balances that are in place outside of what it is that we do. So any capital expenditure, anything that might be significant to a school site that has to do with something like a facility or an outdoor garden, let's say, anything that's large like that, it has to be approved by the California Department of Education ahead of time. So we don't have the flexibility to say, Title I schools, we want a new marquee. It has to go through the CDE for approval beforehand. We actually have something that's called time accounting. It's a very laborious process, but any staff member whose salary is funded by Title I funds has to fill out a regular accounting that says, this is the percentage of my time that I'm working with certain students to qualify to be paid out of Title I funds. Our internal auditor reviews our Title I funding. Our external auditors, and to date, that's been Crow, what they do when they come in for their annual audit every year is they will randomly say, we're going to look at these 10 schools and we want all of the Title I expenditures from this month to this month. We can't prepare for that, right? And so we have to make sure that every single day, all of our expenses are legitimate. And I have to say that there's also a process called Federal Program Monitoring, FPM. I did go back and do the research on the last 2 times that we've had FPM in our district. And you have a team of people that come in from the state on behalf of the federal government, and they will delve into specific school sites. They will go much, much deeper than our external auditors, and they will go in and they will look for every possible receipt to make sure that we have spent our money appropriately. And if we have not, they issue us a finding. We have not had findings the last 2 times. So I hope that this has answered some of the questions that you have about Title I funding. By all means, go back and replay and just, pause on some of those slides so that you can see exactly what is allowable and what is not. Our staff is really good about answering questions also. And if there are any other questions you've had that you've wondered about, by all means, go ahead and send them to cbo@mdusd.org, and I'll answer them for you.